Hailing from the Jersey Shore and raised as athletes, the Airey Bros have always shared a passion for physical culture, athletic performance, and human optimization, always striving to be the strongest versions of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Along the way, they've met some pretty amazing humans and have had some pretty epic adventures. The intention of Airey Bros Radio is to showcase these amazing people and the impact that they've had on them, and to share tips, tricks, and hacks so that you can win each day, every day.
You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
Not like the writers or the creators of The Simpsons are ever going to want to correct someone from claiming that they're like got this Nostradamus effect. So many government agencies had infiltrated this extremist camp where you've had like different agencies that were trying to radicalize each other. So like the CIA guy is radicalizing the FBI guy. The ones that I always thought was going to be like, oh man, give me the dirt on like Club 33 or something. It's like, oh yeah, you pay like 40 grand a year and you can go and drink alcohol in this little stuffy room. Everyone in the Marvel universe, like you could potentially become Wolverine if you also got kidnapped and had your skeleton replaced with adamantium and we're trained and everything. And I kind of think that most adults that are still obsessed with Disney have got something going on. Like either you were MK Ultra programmed. I think my niche could be the one person that will actually go and spend like 3 or 4 years just researching some freaking, Project Monarch and Project Hero and Camp Hero and MK Ultra and Delta and Naomi and like all of the sub projects. Watching the Double Ripple, and someone said like the Jolly Juice. What a great freaking reference.
Where can the good folks purchase your materials? Where can they get your MK Ultra pamphlet? Where can they get all your comics? Where can I get that Connected Dot Chemtrails book for my niece?
So right now, because of the whole pandemic and everything, printers and just the whole entire process of getting short runs, or if I'm not getting like 10,000 made from a huge factory, it's been all over the place. So the best place to go is paranoidamerican.com. And then if you click on any of the comic shop links, they'll bring you to like the Etsy store. And Etsy is where I keep any of like my limited run prints, my signed prints, any kind of like short run. I've got like a whole bunch of, I don't know if I have any around here, but I've got like a bunch of little like pinup stickers and stuff. A little Freemason sticker, Worshipful Master. She's like licking the little trail. And so I've got like all the cool latest stuff that I'm printing and putting out directly is on Etsy. But for all of my comics right now, since I can't afford to have like thousands, in boxes behind me, they're all on Amazon. So if you want Connect the Dots, if you want MK Ultra, if you want Time Samplers, if you want Secret Mystery School, I've got a whole bunch. This is I'm blurry right now, but this is the Paranoid American History 101. It's like an 80-page book. This is a great sampler to kind of like wet your noodle to just see what kind of things that you might like from me. That would probably be the best one to start out, but it's all on Amazon.com right now. And then over the coming year or so, I'm going to try to get placement into more local head shops and comic shops, but I want to try and see if I can take that same underground comics route somehow. And then obviously I will be available on Comixology and a whole bunch of like the online spaces too. I find that those ones people tend to be able to find it a lot easier. A lot of the hardcore comic readers that really love this stuff, like they want that printed one to like bring and pass around and show off. And it doesn't have the same gravitas when you're like, hey bro, check out this cool comic on my phone. And it's like 4 inches wide and, and like they're watching a video on TikTok or something like, oh yeah, it's cool. Fucking cool. Yeah, whatever. It's a little bit different when it's like, hey, check out this badass book, go take a shit and fucking take a nice 40-minute dump with this fucking book, bro. Like this will, like you'll come out feeling smarter and fucking some cool ideas and stuff. So anyways, long-winded way of, if you want any of the comics for now, go to Amazon.com. It's probably the best place to get them. And then over time, the website might have some other places.
Awesome.
Yeah. So what are your kind of thoughts on the general, knowing kind of what doing all the research you do with the occult stuff? Obviously, there's a lot of Walt Disney stuff out there, but working there, having that kind of nostalgic feel for the theme parks and stuff, how do you kind of navigate that space, and what is your kind of general feel on it these days?
I mean, I guess controversially, I kind of think that most adults that are still obsessed with Disney have got something going on. Like either you were MK Ultra programmed, or you got kids, or you got some, just really just super in touch with like the pop culture established version of like for me example, like this isn't pointing fingers, like myself, I kind of grew up with like those Disney VHS cassette tapes as sort of babysitters a lot of the time. Or if it wasn't for my parents, if I went to any of my friends' houses, that was kind of the babysitter, was the Aladdin tape or the Dumbo tape or whatever it was, and it was just always going to be on at some point. So, and I don't think it has anything to do with Florida. That was like no matter where you were at, everyone had like the grandma that had like the chest with a whole bunch of Disney movies just stocked. So whenever the new one came out, it was always something to kind of fall back on. When adults had to go and do something, you could just like corral the kids into like a general vicinity of the TV and pop something on. So I mean, I think that nostalgia aspect, it's impossible to remove. It's like I'm one and the same with a lot of that stuff. Like I can't not get sort of Disney references, and just kind of like the nostalgic parts of it. But at the same time, I love all of the MK Ultra and Project Monarch and all the conspiracy theories that go like real deep into using all that imagery. I think that it's like it doesn't necessarily make it evil, because I think that it's kind of like patterned on top of that. Like, of course, Disney is popular because the same reason that the Brothers Grimm stories were popular. And the same reason the Brothers Grimm stories are popular is because it was based on these like ancient archetypes that are baked in our society today. So if you even go way back to the original stories, and then the Grimm's brothers were like the Disney of their time, and then we've got the Disney of our time, sort of, and it's almost like that baton has yet to be passed to the next big, like kids sort of cartoon takeover.
So, you talk about the adults that are still into it. There's got to be something going on. I would take it a step further, and what do we think about the people that get married there?
But it's extremely expensive to do that kind of thing. I mean,
It's like a
if
20
if you
grand
do it
endeavor on
unsanctioned,
the
yeah,
cheap.
yeah. And they'll whisk you away or kick you out if they try, if you're trying to do something like a big grandstand inversion. I'm sure people can go and just propose in the park itself, but to do the whole thing like in front of the castle and have like the having someone take photos of you, they'll automatically, like, just having what looks like a professional photographer following you around in the park, they'll usually try to skirt you away from that, because they've got their own like in-park photographers that they want you to, pay them for their services.
Yeah. So, with you having spent time there as working there, were you aware of MK Ultra, Monarch, all those things
Oh
before
yeah,
you
big
got?
time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was like fresh out of school, and I had some programming experience, but I was really trying to get into like animation and illustration without necessarily being a great artist myself, pen on paper, but I could like see what, like, I had the visions for it all, and if I had like the art assets, I could animate it all together and put together the storyboards and animatics, and like I could present the story in a nice animated way. Unless, if I had to draw it, it would all be stick figures, but I would still do like that same kind of thing.
Being into MK Ultra kind of before you got there, and knowing all that stuff when you're there, how do you kind of navigate those waters? What do you Are you having a lot of aha moments throughout your time there?
I wasn't like covert about it or anything. Like on my business card, it actually said conspiracy theorist connoisseur. And if anyone was ever open to talk about conspiracy theories, like, there's obviously some stuff, like, you don't want to just start dropping like the deepest of the deep, in the middle of like the coffee station or whatever. But I mean, I would always, I was probably informed everyone I knew there about MK Ultra and the whole Walt's dark past on being, working special agent in charge with the FBI, and just like all of like the cool little facets. I mean, honestly, people inside Disney love all that cool backstory, and anything that makes someone seem more complex than they are. It's, everyone loves a good story, and that was no exception in that spot.
So when you're working there, are you reporting to Hollywood studios daily?
No. So
No.
so you've got like full-time cast members that are legit like inside the Walt Disney Company. And then I was working for a post-production studio that was owned by Disney and it was run by Disney, but there was this transition because they used to take care of if you did like the holiday parade or there was like an American Idol um sort of like an attraction there for a while, and anything that happened in park that someone recorded on video that then needed some kind of editing or post production or like ADR, anything like that at all, it went through this studio that was right there on the back lot. And then at some point, right as I joined, or maybe like a year before I joined, the head of the company bought like the rights out to own the studio, but just stay right there in place and just keep doing everything, so that it would no longer be owned by Walt Disney, the company. It would be owned by this, secondary sort of independent studio that just happened to be paying the rent to Disney and doing all the same jobs that they were doing the day before. Like nothing changed. Everyone I worked with had been in the company for like 20 plus years when they had just opened everything in Orlando and everything. So when I got in, I kind of started as a freelancer and I stayed long enough for 2 or 3 years that they extended it me to full time. And I was there for a total of 10 years. So the whole time it was like on the back lot working with all the Disney guys, but I was kind of just like a contractor. Like I could just wear normal clothes. I did have to go through the training and, learn about the whole Disney history, like as if I was going to go out into the park and greet people. I had to go through that same exact training. But at the end of it, I just went back to the studio and was doing whatever, Foley sound effects and ADR and animation and Photoshop, just anything you name it.
And then, so with your, your business card that said, your title on there, did you ever happen to get called in the principal's office?
No, I only got called in the principal's office for one time, and it was because I didn't want to shave my beard for an ID. And they have this weird, like, militant thing about you have to have a shaved face for the IDs or whatever. But no, I mean, honestly, I didn't drop any like Walt was this anti-Semitic, asshole. Like I might have like whispered that in a back corner when no one else was around to like a couple of the guys that I was working with, but no, I mean, I don't think it was very, very open in that environment. I mean, I loved it. It was definitely not a corporate environment. And like, for example, you start working on something and you would just kind of like drone off or just get lost in the work and you need a break, and sometimes when you step away and just kind of stretch your legs, we would just get up and go and ride the roller coaster for 45 minutes, just like on repeat, just sit there and ride, the Tower of Terror 3 times in a row and then go back to work. And that was okay, and anything that got you over whatever the hump was in front of you was kind of acceptable as long as you get the job done. So I don't know, I absolutely loved and kind of thrived in that environment.
It's funny you mentioned the beard deal and kind of getting in trouble for that or being reprimanded. When one time we went on vacation, we did the backstage at the Magic Kingdom, and obviously they show you all the CIA agents' names on on all the stuff down Main Street, but they also, they talk to you about those codes and they mention tattoos, and that's when I knew I could never work there because the tattoo situation. And I also got to shout out your Rugrats cup. That is awesome. I'm a child of the '90s, so that is awesome as well. And
it's a whole
Ren and
Nicktoons cup.
Stimpy, Hey
You got Hey
Arnold.
Arnold. So I mean, if you want to talk about nostalgia, Nicktoons is right in my heart. You know what I mean? I'm so glad that there hasn't been like some dark Illuminati expose on like all the Nicktoons yet. Knock on wood, I guess.
Have you ever heard of Wisecracks, the YouTube channel?
I don't think so.
Okay, so they did a whole thing on Disney parks
Uh-oh.
and kind of how that's all kind of a dystopian experiment, but they also did the Rugrats and how the parents are, kind of that baby boomer generation that's having trouble with money and what have you, and kind of go into the details of that. So yeah,
What is it?
Nicktoons.
Wisecracks? Wisecracks?
Wisecracks. I'll send you I'll send it to you when we get
Yeah.
off here. I think you'll enjoy it. But that's another talk about nostalgia, universal in the '90s too. I'm sure you kind of experienced that same type of thing growing up in Florida. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
actually had a Nickelodeon took over my middle school in like the early 90s or something. You ever remember that when they had like the whole
Yeah.
thing like, oh, Nickelodeon will come take over? We just happened to be like 2 hours away from Universal Studios, so it wasn't like they had to drive to Denver and take over a school in Denver, right? So like if you actually look at it, it was like over 80% of the schools that got picked were all within like driving
Central
distance. You know
Florida.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, Central Florida and like South Georgia or something. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I had the quintessential Florida Universal Studios experience growing up.
That's awesome.
So in between your breaks when you're riding Tower of Terror, getting those endorphins kicking to get back to work, did you ever kind of venture off and were you investigating, looking into some of these, quote unquote conspiracies and different things that people talk about that go down at Disney?
Within the park, I mean, I worked with some OGs that had been there since forever. One of my really good friends that I worked with, Robbie Pallard, and he did. I don't know if you guys or anyone listening is familiar. There used to be a place in downtown Orlando called Terror on Church Street, which like everyone
Church
used to
Street
just love this
Station.
place. Yeah, and it was called Terror on Church Street, and it was almost like a haunted house that would just open all the time that you could go into. And people loved that place because it was a whole bunch of like ex-Disney or current Disney animatronic artists and sort of like all the prop experts. And that's what he kind of was a prop guy. And then I think he worked on like the very first Jungle Cruise ride as like one of the announced, like he did like every single station. So and I loved all the time I used to kick it with him and get all sorts of like insider info. And I mean, yeah, people would get caught like smoking weed on top of the little buckets that used to go across the park, before they like redid them. And there was like a couple deaths that had happened here and there. They got covered up, and they would usually just get the body off the park and then report it, so it wouldn't be reported as like on the property and stuff. A lot of that, like the ones that I always thought was going to be like, oh man, give me the dirt on like Club 33 or something. It's like, oh yeah, you pay like 40 grand a year and you can go and drink alcohol in this little stuffy room, and they've got like hors d'oeuvres. I was like, oh, it's not like you gotta like give blood. No, it's just you just drop like 40 grand. They can notice a whale that's like, hey, if you're coming here, once a month and you're dropping serious money, they'll be like, hey, for just another 40 grand, you can get this exclusive blah blah blah. So there's that one. There was like the underground tunnels. I was like, oh, where do the underground tunnels go? And the worst there is just that they're horribly underlit. People get hurt like all the time because like you've got to be on one part, and the whole part of the tunnels is that so that characters can just kind of like appear out of nowhere. Like all of a sudden Goofy's just like freaking in Frontierland, and then all of a sudden he's in like Tomorrowland, like moments later. Like how the hell did he get from one place to the other? Because they also have rules of like you could only have one Goofy in the park at one time, so the kids don't get confused. They're like, they really do want you to think that is the real Goofy, So like one of the many of the stories is just the people trying to get from point A to point B, and they all kind of like converge in the center. So people would just be like knocking each other out and breaking each other's noses and just like going into the tunnel and coming back out like a bloody mess. You know what I mean? Like I guess to like outside observer, it's like, oh, they're doing sacrifices, or they're, there's a fight club under there. But it was just like horrible work conditions and, forcing teenagers to run distances in the dark and stuff like that. I don't know. I was hoping that he'd be like, and there's a tunnel that goes underground and there's coffins and, a whole a whole thing. But there was the other cool rumor is that at one point the haunted castle had an actual grimoire on display there, and that they replaced it only recently within like the last 10 years with like a prop, but that originally it had like a grimoire from the Middle Ages or something. So those are my top three, I guess.
Yeah, I think more of I wouldn't even call it the conspiracy side of things, but if you really just look at Disney from an outside observer, Disney World, right? I'm not talking about the movies, but they do a good job of creating false realities, false settings with the smells, the binaural beats everywhere. And I think that's the stuff that people don't pick up on is, oh, you're going to almost have a psychedelic trip without the drugs being induced. Kind of hard to go. Obviously, you're going to spend a lot of cash there, but it's kind of hard to go there and not smile at some point.
Well, and you're talking about like the binaural beats and stuff. They also, I can't remember I'm almost positive it was a Disney thing, but there was like a phone booth that you would get into, And instead of like, listening to a certain thing, there was speakers all around the inside of the phone booth. And it was like an entire radio play of like a guy coming home and like a lady coming home and like police coming to the door and banging on the door. But the way that the speakers were all situated around you, like 360, it felt like you were like transported in this whole different, like a radio world or something. And again, that was like early 90s. So I love, yeah. And another cool thing a lot of people don't realize is that all sorts of technology companies, ride companies, like they want to get their stuff in the Universal and Disney World first out in front of a bunch of people, not just to get sort of like user feedback from international audiences, but that's kind of like the place to be, right? So if you like, hey, I got this new cool tech and Disney's using it, all of a sudden you got more people attracted to you. And it's got this cool sort of like pendulum effect or like a multiplier effect where, all of a sudden Disney just automatically attracts, crazy people and crazy technology. And you go into those parks and you're kind of living in the future, like literally like the future land, the Tomorrowland, right? At a certain point, you'd go there as like, oh, isn't that funny how like those weird 1960s and 70s people thought the future would be? But that's because you were watching this like old ass attraction that hadn't been updated in 20 or 30 years. Like when it actually came out, that was crazy forward thinking. And a lot of it kind of came true and then became outdated after a while.
Well, how about Spaceship Earth? You used to go through Spaceship Earth and they used to show the students kind of in a classroom with the teacher on the screen or whatever. And fast forward to 2020, that was kind of the world people were living in then. And then, Interventions and Epcot always used to roll out experimental, whether it be the Coca-Cola station trying to different flavors of Coca-Cola or the video games that Intervention.
There was like Interverse, I think it was called, or it was like inside. It was like some kind of like inside the human body.
Yeah,
and you went to this whole thing. They replaced it with something, but in there it was just like nonstop like science experiments and like all kinds of. And at one point they had internet version of like Sega Genesis that you could go in there. You remember all that?
Oh yeah, that was, I feel like that was 95, 96. Those are all in those nostalgia, like deep rooted vibes. So I'm definitely picking up what you're throwing down there. Parlaying that to kind of what you got going on now and creating your own content and making the comics and putting everything out that you put out. Obviously you've taken what you've learned over the years and put it into your own projects. I kind of want to go into how you manage, because I know you said you had a dreaded day job, as Isaac put it, at maybe Lululemon. You might have said, I know Rich has done some time at Lulu, so I'm sure you guys can bond over that. But how do you kind of manage your time in writing these stories, making a comic book, putting all the content out that you put out, and also working a 9 to 5?
So it's kind of weird. There's a weird answer because I'll preface it with that. If all of a sudden I was making like $500,000 a year just doing comics, then of course I would give up everything else I was doing and just focus on it, right? But there's this deeper thing that I have, this like deeper itch that I have to scratch constantly. And kind of at heart, I'm a programmer, and I got to be working on something programming wise, because for whatever reason, like I've been my soul's been sucked up by the freaking Matrix, and I just love talking to computers and the logic involved and just like the back and forth feedback loop. There's something about it that it's like my drug, so even without comics, I would have to get this like programming bug itch just scratched constantly somehow. So my day job kind of feeds into that a little bit. I work for like like a Lululemon style company you were mentioning, but it's kind of like a company that helps just organize that and set those shops up and like automate stuff. So I just love that, like I don't know, just completely geeking out and just talking to a computer for 8 hours a day, and then not having to talk to actual people for long stints, I guess. So that's part of it. So it's not always like a dreaded day job aspect of it. It's kind of like I have to get that other part sort of satisfied. And then like I almost have to force myself to get into a creative mode a lot of the time, especially just from, old age, just beating the shit out of you and just like kicking all the creativity out of you, making you feel like an idiot for, thinking about comic books or playing video games after a certain age. But after you get over that hump, like you were saying, I just took all of the years of kind of learning, and a lot of it is just like push things over the finish line. Like most of the time, all you got to do is finish that script and then finish that artwork and, you know, put the two things together and write that email. And like, if it just enters your mind, like, oh, I had to do that thing, like, just do it right then. You know what I mean? Like, don't be like, yeah, I'll make sure I get around to that. Just get it done right then. And that kind of a mentality is like the number one thing to just get these things done. Because there's so many people that have got, you know, projects that they want to get done or something they've kind of had on their mind for a while. And at a certain point, like, you just got to decide if I'm going to actually do it or not. So it's kind of just a philosophy of like continuously, you know, I got to get this thing done.
So you mentioned you have to talk to computers. It's
Yeah.
you're into it. Does something like you know, the topic of transhumanism, does that sort of does that resonate with you? Does that not sit well with you? The merging of humans with technology. Where do you stand on that?
I mean, I think it's inevitable, right? Like you're either gonna be like a completely rural, I'm disconnecting from the grid, or you're gonna be actively engaging with it. Even if you yourself don't get Neuralink, if everyone around you is using it, or even like a slight majority of the society is using it, like you're in it. You know what I mean? Like the things that they're doing are being kind of influenced by that technology. So, and if you got to live, you know, shoulder to shoulder with them constantly, then you're in it too. So there's going to be like a gradual sort of, everyone's going to have different versions of it. Like an example, right? If you wanted to go right now and check out if you had colon cancer, it's still like it's like the one thing you got to go and they stick a little camera and they do the whole thing, right? But there might be a possibility of you just taking a pill and little freaking robots fly around and take little, you know, LiDAR pictures and, you know, images and stuff. And it just comes out naturally. And it's like a non-invasive version of that. Well, that's sort of a like it didn't stay in your body, right? But if there was a version that just stayed in there and just was like, hey, I'm just going to swim around and check shit out and let you know if something's going wrong. Bam. I mean, that's transhumanism. You've got a you know, a machine inside of you that's kind of like working with you as an extra like function almost. And then you know, the far extreme is like, I'm gonna drill a hole in my freaking head and connect the freaking, you know, and this one kind of scares me the most because like, think about the USB cable, right? I'm gonna drill a hole in my head and stick in a USB cable. Oh, but then the USB B comes out. Oh, and then the USB C comes out. Oh, but then there's like a 3 and a 3.1 and a 3.2, and oh, now we got like the supercharging version. So there's always gonna be this like maintenance cycle, right? Of like, oh man, I got the Neuralink from 10 years ago. This thing is getting old. Like I need to upgrade to the new thing. That's the part that scares me because now you've got people that are going to be going in and out and just getting surgery nonstop, and that would be kind of like a new way of life, right? Like you're just, oh, I'm going to hit up the freaking surgeon on the way home and just get my Neuralink thing tweaked constantly. I don't know. I like, if I ever go into the phone store and have them upgrade my phone, I'm always terrified they're gonna like screw something up on my phone, let alone, you know, poke around in your brain, right?
So,
are you not signing up for Neuralink? Or are you waiting for like?
I wouldn't sign up for it. I don't think so, man.
We talk about the robot, you know, going in, and I believe it was a Disney movie. I think it was called Inner Space with Dennis Quaid and Martin Short, where they shrunk him and then he went into was it Dennis Quaid was inside, or was it?
Yeah, they shrink him down and he's like flying around and he's like fighting, you know, white blood cells and stuff.
Well, you were kind of alluding to that attraction at Epcot. That was an attraction at Epcot where you went inside the dude's body and you rode it around. And then there was that Osmosis Jones film as well.
I mean, it's probably the Disney reason in that movie, but yeah, it's like I just got a nostalgic. And what else was like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids had like that same sort of, they didn't go into a human body, but that same feeling of like shrinking down to like 1/100th of your size and just going back through a normal place, you know. What else? You had like a Magic School Bus. I think the very first the very first book of Magic School Bus, they shrink down and go inside the human body. It was a recurring theme in our childhood for whatever reason. That was like a thing that just kept coming up over and over. So now I just love that theme.
So is it one of those things that you think it's something that we kind of create? You know, they say The Simpsons or like all the Matrix references or 9/11 references, Mandela effect. Like, is this something we create or something that they're kind of letting us know?
I think we create it just because there's so much evidence of people making a Simpsons like screenshot and then like trying to make it backdate it so it looks like it was like a prophecy, but really it was like there was the big one is Trump coming down like an escalator or something, and I think it was actually done after he had announced and not before, but a lot of people like cite it as being before. That might be the wrong example, but there's countless examples of, you know, and it's not like the writers or the creators of The Simpsons are ever going to want to correct someone from claiming that they're like got this Nostradamus effect where they can predict the future, because all it does is just builds that like forever legacy of The Simpsons, you know, because now there's going to forever be people in this world that go to their, you know, deathbed believing that Simpsons truly prophesized, you know, actual events in human history. And when you've got that much staying power, dude, like Simpsons might in itself just be this whole another Disney in the future. You never know.
Yeah, I think you make a valid point, and I don't want to go too far in the weeds, but I think it's the same thing with Masons, right? Like they're never going to correct you on what you say the craziness is going on, where it's just like for most parts, it's like a bunch of guys like playing pool, reading scripture and Manly P. Hall books.
That's the branding, right? I mean, why would you screw with the branding? That's the one thing that really attracts anyone to any kind of secret society, is like that mysterious aspect of it. If you just walked up and they had like the menu on the front, you know, window, you know what I mean? And you just read through the menu and you're like, oh yeah, none of that really sounds like anything I'm interested in. You could just keep walking on. Then, you know, sort of like attendees and new recruits would just plummet instantly. So that I talked about that on some other podcasts previously, but that is like the eternal carrot that you can always dangle, even if you've got someone that has all the knowledge of the world and all the wealth of the world. You've got like, you know, the Meyer Rothschild sitting in front of you, and he's like, what can you, you know, possibly offer me that I can't buy or that I haven't bought like 1,000 times over? And you could be like, oh, I've got the secret, you know, mysteries of the ancients. Like I know what your forefathers knew. Like who can resist that? No matter what class you're in, no matter what your belief set is in, it's like, oh, I know what the people thousands of years ago knew. And if you want to know, then you can just, you know, just follow this carrot over here, you know, sign up or take this oath or, you know, sign up for this MLM sort of excursion, whatever it is. That carrot is just, it's always going to be there for humans, I think. Like, no, like you're never going to find a like a rich old bored guy that's not like, but maybe there is something to that. You know what I mean? Like I can't die not knowing if that guy was just going to be a swindler or if he actually had the secret to the universe.
It's Pro Wrestling 101.
That's a great example, man. Like you just never break character, even if everyone in the audience knows that it's fake. Like you just don't ever break character, right?
Yeah, I think it's hard for. I don't think people like to admit when they get worked, right? It's like that Andy Kaufman thing. Like you never knew when he was being real or playing around. And I think because I grew up watching wrestling, I kind of see that, and it's hard for people when they see stuff on the media to not take it like literal.
To me, that's genius, man. Andy Kaufman is like a god among sort of artists, just because there's, you know, in retrospect, you kind of know some of the stuff was just purely an act, but he did it so freaking well and never broke character. Like I can't not have so much respect for anyone that does that. I don't care, you know, what kind of extremes he pushed people to and how he inconvenienced people, and he was an absolute asshole in the process. But man, dude, like you need people that are doing that kind of stuff out there. It won't be me, but I'm glad it was him, you know.
But he's one of those guys that like Elvis and Tupac and Biggie that people still claim that he's alive and they see him. I think there was one claim I read that he was spotted in like Coeur d'Alene, Idaho or something at like a supermarket.
Tony
It
Clifton.
would be the ultimate, you know, long joke, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So Thomas, mentioning that you're not doing the upload, you're not going into Neuralink. How do you how do you kind of navigate all the research you do, diving into the occult stuff or the comic books, and kind of staying sane? Do you have a kind of practice, kind of stay level headed? How do you kind of sift through what's real, what's not, and how to kind of handle all that stuff and use it for, a creative resource?
I think like ever since I was a kid, just anyone that has ever presented themselves as an authority in any way, like my just gut reaction is to go and like, like push them down or like throw an egg at them or like get someone to laugh at them or like just do something. And it's not out of like a malicious, pugilistic sense. It's more of like like that hacker sense, like where I need a program, like that's where I can go and I can test the limits of a system and not end up in jail or getting like my teeth kicked in. You know what I mean? Like I can do that within like a computer system. And I kind of like just that idea of like hacking. And if you take the concept of hacking, but now you're talking about like the teacher in front of you or the the sheriff resource officer in front of you or the teacher or whatever, like if you've got one of those authority figures in front of you, they don't like being hacked, and you can actually get in serious trouble kind of like going through that. So I don't know, I think that that's kind of like the people approach. um I have it in like these two different, I guess, categories. But once I actually figured out how to like stop trying to like hack everything, I guess, and scratch that itch in its own way, it I sort of like take that same methodical skepticism and I'm always doing it in the back of my head. You know what I mean? Like, so for example, if I'm watching like a Jordan Maxwell, who I'm a huge fan of, RIP Jordan Maxwell, but whenever someone makes like a very definitive statement, like it just triggers something like, how the fuck do you know for sure? Like you just said that, like for absolute sure. And I'm calling bullshit. Like I always have that voice in the back of my head that's like, and or flat earth, or you're talking round earth, or you're talking like any kind of scientists, any concept at all. Whenever someone starts saying things so matter of factly, I just feel like I wouldn't want to be the guy that like gets pointed out, but the one that's in the crowd that's like, you don't know that, you know what I mean? And then like the whole crowd's like, hey, maybe this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Like I love that wave of like questioning, you know what I mean? And that might also be like that 90s sort of like pop, anti-culture, pro culture, sort of like question everything, X-Files, genetics that are like baked inside my mentality. But it's, I guess, that's where I'm going at it, where like to stay sane is that I just don't ever take anything seriously. Even when it comes to like the deep dark sort of like MK Ultra Project Monarch, like some of it makes sense and some of it I do agree with, but I don't think I've ever read a full book on mind control where I was like, oh, this dude's 100% right. And like, there's all of this checks out 100%, like there's always some kind of bias. There's always some sort of like leaps of faith and logic. And I always go back to the trivium of being like these basic building blocks of like understanding the words that you're reading, understanding what logical fallacies are, and then understanding what rhetoric is. And for me, I didn't know what rhetoric was until I discovered NLP. And like I think you guys are mentioning, some people don't like to get swindled. I hate being swindled. Everyone hates being swindled. But if you ever see it happen like real time, like if you're like, I'm being swindled right now, like right now I'm being swindled, but it still happens, and you're like, no, stop, I don't want to get sold on this thing. Like you're at a timeshare, you like go to a flea market or whatever, and you're like, this, like the shit that this guy is selling is gonna break, it's garbage, like it's none of it's real. And
I'll
you're
take
just like,
two.
but why? Yeah, dude, why am I taking my wallet out right now? Exactly. So I saw that happen to me a couple times, and I realized what had happened, and I tried to like seek out, and I found out that it was just like some stupid sales technique that was applied to me, and I didn't know what the hell it was, and it was like a freaking like a sleeper hold that just came out of like nowhere and just like pinched my neck, and then I didn't know what the defense mechanism was, so it was just like, oh, take 5, So like I guess that like all of that together kind of has kept me sane, of just like constantly being skeptical of everything, always being like, if someone states something matter of factly, don't believe them. Like, in fact, disbelieve them. You know what I mean? And then try to come around the other way. Another good way my dad used to tell me, because he's kind of like this contrarian, and he said this quote that I'll never forget. And he's like, even though vanilla is my favorite ice cream flavor, if someone else came up to me and they were like, vanilla is the greatest ice cream flavor in the world. Agree? You know, even if it's my favorite, I'd be like, I don't know, chocolate's pretty good. Have you ever had chocolate? You know, like just that like concept of like, I want to make sure that you really agree with that before I agree with it. I don't know. So I guess that kind of like root DNA of all of it, I think keeps me sane. I hope it keeps me sane.
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting thing. You mentioned flat Earth, and I find it always fascinating where people like that seems to be the one thing where people just think you're completely off the reservation if you even bring it
Talk
up
about
or you
it.
talk about it. I'm like, but you haven't had science since 12th grade, and that was 27 years ago. Like, at least these people are out doing some sort of research or test, or you know, you're just well, someone in high school told me, my astronomy teacher told me that this is the case, or Neil deGrasse Tyson says it's so, or
Bingo, man.
the
That's
Rand
it
McNally
exactly,
book
right?
said that it's so, but you're just, you can't let go of that disbelief that it could potentially be something other than what you were
I,
told.
I wish I cared enough about math and geology to like actually, you know, be able to be like, no, you know, I'm going to disprove this because I know that in this year, this formula, and, you know, when all those things come up about curvature and why are these buildings, like, how can I see this thing over the horizon? And why are these buildings don't like stray away from each other? And I just don't care enough about physics and math to like get deep into that, but I absolutely respect anyone that's passionate enough about that topic to go into it. That, you know, I wouldn't ridicule anyone that's passionate enough to know more about something than I do. You know, if I want to ridicule someone, I feel like it's the burden is on me to research all the shit around it to make sure that I can come prepared with all the information. And if it's not a topic that I, you know, if I particularly care about, like I've got so many years left on the planet, right?
Yep.
I'm not going to learn everything that I want to learn. And I think like math and geology and physics are probably going to be at the tail end, you know, maybe when I'm like 80 and I'm like, I've seen the world. Now it's time to learn trigonometry, and maybe I'll get over that D- that I had to get twice.
Yeah, yeah. So talking about the comics again, you know, I've seen it's more of like a pamphlet, the MK Ultra pamphlet. I think you also talked
Oh yeah.
with Adam and Deborah about it as kind of where I first came to know of you and your work. And then I also heard you talking with Isaac um, about the children's book. And
Oh
so
yeah.
I'm really
Connect the
excited.
dots.
I'm really excited about that because I have a goddaughter who is going to be 2 in December, and there's nothing that I could possibly get her that her parent materialistically that her parents already don't provide for her. So I'm always looking to get like very unique and interesting things. And so like her first birthday, I got her an ABC book about Olympic wrestlers, just to kind of set that seed. So I think this second go around, we're going to get her the connected dot chemtrail book.
Awesome.
I mean, if there's one thing that I hope I can specialize in, it's fill in those crazy niches where, like, if there's a person out there that possibly wants a children's book about chemtrails, I don't think there's anyone else out there that's making it. So I was like, I need to be the one that does that. You know, I'll take that.
You've been doing Paranoid American for a while, I think like 2011, 2012. And now kind of, you know, with stuff Netflix is putting out, the Mike Myers film, there's cartoons, there's a lot of this stuff that's kind of more in the public, but you've been out there holding it strong prior to 2020. So what's it like for you to kind of see this stuff coming to the forefront, and what are you kind of looking into to kind of stay ahead of the curve of, you know, this is the stuff you might have been talking about 5-10 years ago. Now, you know, it's in the mainstream. What are you kind of looking into right now that's ahead of the curve of that stuff?
So I gotta like, this comes up in my mind constantly, right? Because every time there's like a new series that comes out based on a comic book or just like a new idea, it's like, oh, you know, what a cool idea. But also, it's very few and far between that these series pan out and they're actually really good. And a lot of the time, the concept that draws you in is the best part about it. And then when you actually go to watch it, it's like, okay, yeah, it's cool. Like the concept is cool, but the actual delivery and the execution maybe won't be that great. So I don't really feel like I'm ever trying to like stay ahead of some curve of like some new thing coming out, and particularly with dealing with like conspiracies and occult and esoteric topics, very rarely does like outside of conspiracy, at least, very rarely does something just like come out that just like shatters the whole world, that like changes everything that you know. It's usually like someone's got a theory and then it has to permeate and only like certain small groups believe it, and then they break up into like different interpretations of it, so it doesn't explode. And then with conspiracy theories, you've got these like huge events that'll happen, but man, like personally, it seems like it makes more sense to wait for the dust to settle for like maybe overly conservatively, but like 20 or 30 years or something, and you wait for all the different theories to come in, and perhaps some leaks to come out or documents to become unclassified, or just you wait for a little bit more information to come out to draw from everything. Because the worst thing in the world would be to like write a story that hinges on a certain conspiracy theory, and then like a news article comes out that just absolutely unequivocally devastates it, bipartisanly version, just like absolutely destroys kind of like a core aspect of it. Just like if you're writing a story and then the person you're writing about just dies, all of a sudden there's like this incontinuity between reality and the thing that you're delivering to put out. And unless you can write something and produce it and put it out within like a month, things change. The actual world shifts around. Like a lot of the conspiracy theories that I was writing, it was kind of like what would happen if the global conglomerate and the Illuminati actually existed, and they were actually trying to like inflict mass control on the population. Like I couldn't predict the mass pandemics that were about to hit. Like how awesome would that have been if I like knew that was the thing? And I'm almost tempted to go back and like rewrite certain like foreshadowing stuff, like, oh no, now they're talking about a pandemic, they're not talking about this other thing, just so it could like match reality. But again, it's like, if anything, it taught me to stop chasing like what can I get on an edge, and instead it's more like I think my niche could be the one person that will actually go and spend like 3 or 4 years just researching some freaking Project Monarch and Project Hero and Camp Hero and MK Ultra and Delta and Naomi and like all of the sub projects, and what are the sources for those sub projects, where were they leaked from, do all the sources match up, do the dates match up, do the names match up? If I read the document myself, is that name misspelled, or maybe someone mistransposed it because it was done with like an old typewriter, and can I find who that guy is? And if there's no one else out there on the Netflix team that's going that deep into it, then I feel like that's my niche. And that's kind of the niche that I can kind of fit, is that like if you find something that says Paranoid American on it, you can be guaranteed that it's not just like, oh, what a cool concept, and once you start reading into it, you're like, oh, the concept was just on the cover. Like you'll find like the tiny little details and like the dates and the names and everything like buried deep in there. So it might not be like the first thing that flies off the shelf, but I really hope that it finds the people that it's meant for, because there's not going to be anything else out there that's kind of like paying that much fan service to this kind of a niche.
And with that being said, mentioning multiple years of research and making sure you've dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's and measured twice before you cut once. Once all that is said and done, what does your creative process look like?
It's shifted a lot, but right now it's basically come up with an idea, decide how much is this idea worth to me in like a very like in a time and a financial point of view, because every single page has a finite amount of money that it's going to cost to produce that page and amount of time, and it's going to take artists that I want to work with off of what they could be doing to work on this thing. So it's kind of like, what's my appetite? My number one question: how big is my appetite? Is it a 5-page appetite? Is this something that's like, I want to drop 100 pages into this? I want to, like, an example is I haven't done anything about like the Oklahoma City bombing before, and I really, really want to. And I've had a couple different ideas, but all those, like one idea was like a 5-pager, one was 12 pages, one was even like a single 20-page one shot, maybe even 30 pages. And every time I went to approach it, I'm just thinking like, I'm never gonna do this particular topic again. Like if I do an OKC anything, it's just gonna be that one thing, and I'm probably like, I don't want to be the comic company that like all I do is just keep telling the same story about Oklahoma City over and over again. I want to like kind of touch everything. But that's an example where I can't get it out of my head that particular story needs like 140 pages plus. at the bare minimum to just get the seeds planted that I would want to plant for like if Netflix came and said, oh, this is going to be a series now. Like I already know what the other 50 issues might kind of be, based on this broader thing. So for a lot of it, it's like, what's my appetite? So clearly that one is like, my appetite's way bigger than my budget, by years and years. I gotta wait for like the Kickstarter from fucking heaven to just drop on me and be like, blam, 400,000 people backed your project. That's the number one thing. I'm probably gonna do that one next. You know what I mean? But then usually it fits somewhere between 8 pages and 20 pages. I lean towards doing like single shots. So if I decide it's going to be a 12 page or 20 page, then I'm either going to do a sort of a 3 break outline or 3 acts or 5 acts. So 3 beginning, middle, end. Can't be anything simpler than that. And then if you do 5, you can kind of like decide where the climax is going to be either in act 3 or act 4. And then once I've got, the page count and I've got my act structure down, it just sit down and I just do bullet points. Like, what are the biggest events that I want to have happen in this? What are the coolest visuals that could possibly come out of this whole thing? Like if I had this whole story idea and I had you just walking away with one image in your head, what's the coolest freaking most impressionable image that I want you to walk away with? And I'll start there and then kind of right outside, like expand what happens after and what happens before that to kind of get to those cool sort of situations. So that's kind of what I've learned to do over time. And then it just keeps breaking it down more and more detail. Okay, here's the 3 sections. The climax is this big image. Then how many pages of that? It's 3 pages. Great. How many panels are on each page? That one's got 4. That one's got 5. What's in those exact panels? And then by the time you ask that last question, what are in those panels? You step away and you've got an entire comic script.
Fascinating. And you mentioned, working with different artists and stuff. Are you seeking out people that are conspiratorial minded artists, or are they seeking you
it's
out?
Impossible. It's
Have
kind
you
of
had people tell you
impossible.
no when you tell them?
Yeah, big time.
Oh yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I've had artists that I was working with that were delivering, 3 or 4 pages in, and then just, discover in the script that like it's way against what, their view is, and they just up and leave. They're just like, yeah, I don't want to be associated with this. It's like, oh, you could have read the whole script before you started, but it happens.
Interesting. And then with that being said, is there any one particular thing about OKC that kind of draws you to that or intrigues you, or why you're
no, there's like 100 things.
Millions.
Dude, like some of them are really crazy, man. Like the biggest one, it's so hard to like this is why I like comic books more than I like doing podcasts or interviews or even just like sitting down and trying to explain to someone something, because there's this weird, as you read about Timothy McVeigh growing up, he wasn't like a freaking bumpkin out in the woods that was just like blasting off his rifle constantly. He was a fucking nerd, dude. Like he in the early 80s, he had a computer connected to like an ancient version of the internet and was posting on the internet with people that were typing in like Perl and making CGI scripts and stuff. His heroes were like people from Star Trek, X-Men. Like he loved Wolverine and Cyclops and shit. Like he was a quintessential 80s 90s satanic panic computer nerd that just happened to bond with his grandpa over his grandpa being really good at guns. And then that kind of became part of his identity as he like grew a little bit older and got, he absolutely got screwed in the head. But I remember just like reading that, like, damn, I always just thought he was just this lone wolf, freaking, David Koresh, backwoods weirdo that talked, Jesus just talked to him since he was 3. I assume that's just like what that kind of, character was. And then it was like, oh, he was, he loved X-Men. He loved doing computer programming. He joined the military right out of school. Like, I was like, oh, this is like my life story, beat for beat for beat. Outside of, then becoming brainwashed and, blowing up a building. I didn't go through that same sort of trajectory, but that aspect of it. And then as you read more into it, man, it's got freaking everything in it. It has absolute mind control in it. It's got government corruption with officials that are still in power right now in the government today, as I say this. It's got like just government bumbling and fuck ups, accidentally killing the wrong people, torturing the wrong people to get information that the people didn't even have, just nonstop people screwing up, Waco and sort of like Ruby Ridge just times 100. And then you've got this comical, and I say comical in like a very sick, morbid way, right? But comical in that like so many government agencies had infiltrated this like, extremist camp where you've had like different agencies that were trying to radicalize each other. So like the CIA guy is radicalizing the FBI guy, and then like, some other like some other group comes in and they're reporting to each other like, oh bro, we got to move on this now. They've got bombs, they've got guns, and it's just like the different, alphabet officers talking each other up. So there's like this element to it. There's so much. And then on top of all this, the first transgender federal prisoner, I think, like the first one that had ever been transferred to actually go into like a female prison after going through like the transsexual process, they were directly involved with the Oklahoma City bombing. Like there, and that person went on to be like a leading sort of like transgender inmate and transgender inmate issues like to this very day. So like they get to go down in history with like all these who knows, maybe a Nobel Peace Prize at some point, maybe not that far of an extreme, but if you look at all the people connected to it, like they're still around today making impressions on, everything. It's was that enough reasons to go into it? I mean,
I'll buy 10 copies.
Well, I'm fascinated because they talk about certain events at time in history that you remember the details of where you were, what you were doing on that day, and all that stuff. OKC is one of those events for me. It was my freshman year in college. It was in the spring. I was walking to class, and then I also later in life had the opportunity to live in Oklahoma City. Wow. So I have a connection to the town or the city, and I've also run the Memorial Marathon 3 times now. So I just have a. And then again, it wasn't until after I lived there really where I really started to dive down some of these rabbit holes and really kind of investigate things and watch documentaries and different things. And then you're like, oh, this is one of those events where they kind of didn't do what they said really happened.
There's this amazing thread that anyone that is, if you're even like 10% interested in the topic, you yourself can easily follow this thread that goes from Ruby Ridge to Waco to Oklahoma City to sort of whatever the next big thing's going to be. Like you can see all of what the next big things were going to be, and I'm not going to name them by name. But like just various events that were supposed to be that big thing that, Big Brother came in and said, we'll protect you, but you got to give us everything in exchange for it. It hasn't yet worked, but you can see the natural progression and like the same tactics and the same everything. So I don't know, it's like seeing like a slow motion like train just coming right at you, and you're just like, I know I got to step off these tracks, but there's no time to do it.
Yeah.
Thomas, so there was a lot there that I wrote down that kind of had those light bulbs go off. I think the one thing you said about the connection, right? How, especially with the mind control stuff, it's all kind of connected and you can kind of see it. I had that same kind of experience with Jolly West and some of the MK Ultra stuff and how that web kind of goes out.
Yeah, I was watching the double ripple and someone said like the Jolly juice. And I don't know if that was the exact quote in it, but man, like that statement, like Jolly Juice or whatever it was.
Jolly West drip. I'm glad you got that because I don't think anyone did.
See, that's the kind of thing though, man, that like makes the back of my, the necks on the back of my neck stand up, because it's like, what a great freaking reference, because like, first of all, Jolly's not even the name. That's his nickname of Dr. Joliton West or something like that. And like, you only know that his name is Jolly if you're already somewhat deep inside of like, MK Ultra, Project Monarch. And then to say like the Jolly drip is kind of like, okay, now you know specifically that this dude is like always shows up around somewhere to kind of get them to talk, and they give him the freaking drip or some sort of like he's the guy, dude. Like if you need the finisher, he's the freaking closer that you bring in. You know what I mean?
Thomas, you just made my semester because no one understood that, and the fact that you kind of just gave me that soundbite, I did my job. The other thing is to kind of hear you talk about having the appetite for something or the bandwidth. I relate to that 100%, especially diving into all the occult stuff. There's all these concepts, and you dive deeper into spirituality and all that, all these concepts that come up for creating stories. But it goes back to, well, how much time do I want to put into this? How much bandwidth do I have for it? So I kind of vibe with you on that, and having all these ideas, but like being able to sit down and be like, all right, I'm gonna put a year into this because that's how long it's gonna take to do it proper. And then also hearing your process for writing. Like, I feel like I've gone to school for 3 years to have you tell me that, because like that, just kind of the bullet points of how you do it, think about how many shots it's going to be, what it's going to look like. And I never thought about that for comics, is you're writing shot by shot, because obviously, it's a little bit different than writing typical literature, because you have
man.
to...
There's two huge things about comics that takes people many years to sort of like understand after you're like, why is this story not coming across the way that I wrote it? And one of it is that you're constantly describing everything as a snapshot. Like, nothing in these comic panels is moving. And very often when you're writing something, you want to be like, the guy shuts the car door, or he shuts his hand in the car door, right? Well, as a comic, you got to show him opening the car door. You got to show him going to close it while his hand is like still in the way, and then you got to show another panel of it like on his hand crunching it with like a little sound effect, and then another panel with him like holding the hand up, like looking at it, and it's bruised, saying like, you know what I mean? Like that's 4 different things that kind of had to happen. And you can, if you're good, you can do it in 2 or 3 or something, but like, you can't have a guy get out of the car and slam the hand in the car door and look at his hand all in one shot. But you can easily write that into like a screenplay where an actor just goes and does that thing really quick in front of the camera. So that's one big thing that you got to like think in snapshots in time. Like, if you had a photographer that was shooting the movie and like you only got like 8 photos for this 5-minute scene, like, what are those 8 photos? What photos tell the story the best way in like a linear fashion? And then the other one too is that like the page turns matter a whole great deal. So something that happens at the end of the page, you don't always necessarily want to pick up exactly where that panel left off after you turn the page. Like that page turning is like, that can be like night and day, changing, or that could be like an explosion happens and you just leave like the crazy shit off the page, so that the actual process of turning it, or if you're doing it digitally, you swipe to the next one, like leave some of the action to happen in between those panels, because the person reading it, their imagination might be way cooler than anything that you can like sit down and write at 3 a.m. on like a freaking Tuesday night or something. You know what I mean? Like, their imagination, once you set the tone for everything, you kind of gotta give the wheel over, not just to the artist, but you got to give the wheel over to the reader, and trust the reader is on board with what you're delivering, and let them kind of put the pieces together a little bit.
Thomas, I assume you've always been a comic book, for lack of a better term, geek or nerd. I was a comic book geek for a long time too. What are some of your favorites? That are near and dear to your heart. Do you still have an extensive collection?
I've whittled it down, although it's funny you ask, because like right behind me, I've got like 4 boxes, because the last time I went and saw my parents, it was finally like, take the rest of your shit. So now I've got a whole bunch of my old comics, and like I know very well all the different ones, and like the nostalgia dopamine hits were just blasting. But it was like Lobo was my one and only, I think, DC series that I just love. Like, Lobo is like, it's kind of like, I wish I could be like Lobo. Like, if I could pick one superhero, it would probably be Lobo. And then all the Marvel stuff, it was just like Spider-Man and X-Men and Incredible Hulk. But there was a certain point in time too when I discovered like, adult comics, and there was like some like underground like Zap comics, like R. Crumb style comics, a lot of like the stuff that you'd find in like your dad's closet, you know what I mean? I loved all the Fabulous Freak Brothers, just like the long list of all those kind of like shock comics that kind of like got ingrained. And then even when I was in the military, I remember the very first time that I was allowed to go off base and like go and spend money and like buy, physical items again that weren't just at the BXPX. Like, it wasn't just shampoo and fucking razors or something. and I just stocked up on like Vampirella comics and like X-Force comics. So I guess forever it's always been something that I've really fell in love with. And then ironically, as I was working on my first comic, I hadn't really read comics or touched them in almost like a decade or something. And one of my friends suggested that I read The Walking Dead and that I read The Boys. This is in like the early 2000s, mid 2000s. And both like The Boys specifically, and I know it's got like this huge thing on Amazon or Netflix now or something, and it's an awesome series. But that the book series like reinvigorated me, where I was like, oh wow, like there's actual comics that are written well for adults. That's not just like boobs and fart jokes and like racist jokes. Like there's like legitimately an awesome story here, and it's things that another thing too that goes in the writing, but the comic medium lets you do shit that you would have to hire, a room full of freaking VFX editors to sit there and animate shit all day. You can get an illustrator that can do that on a page, and it doesn't cost, tens of millions of dollars in budget. So why not make sure that your comics do these crazy things? So like The Boys is such a great example of like dudes that can like shrink inside and go inside of other guys. Here's the same theme, right? That I always pay attention to, but like to actually convey that in a movie or on like even on like a stage play or something, just the amount of effort that would go into that versus drawing it. And the same thing if like Galactus, right? Imagine trying to portray the scale of Galactus and Silver Surfer outside of like the 2000s, like in the 90s or the 80s or the 70s. Like it would just look cheesy as hell, right? It would be a guy behind a sheet wearing like a huge helmet and then like a stupid little like action figure, and then they have like cut shots, but it wouldn't look right. But even back then in the 20s and 30s and 40s, they could draw these crazy outlandish things that no one in the world at that point could have ever put in front of a camera. So that's such like a cool aspect, and I think that connected with me at some point where I was like, man, even with like all of the Hollywood technology at our disposal, even right now in 2022, they can't recreate the crazy stuff that like goes on inside of the brain of just someone that's making up ideas.
That's cool. I dig it. You mentioned like the adult comics, and I have a fear if I like Google adult comics, like you said, I'm gonna get like boobs and TNA and like fart stuff. Do you have any recommendations? Because I was actually trying to figure out
savers.
what I used to be into them in the 80s, and I don't even know how to go about trying to track down some of the ones that I was
Yeah. I mean, the number one suggestion. I'm not endorsed by, although I would like to be, but I think it's called mycomicshop.com, and a few others. But if you just look for the main publishers, or just go into like the 70s and just look for anyone that's not Marvel and DC, you'll all of a sudden you'll start to notice it was like the same 5 or 6 publishers that were putting a lot of the stuff out. A really cool one is Armadillo, I think, and they were like based out of Texas, outside of Austin or something. And they kind of like put out some of the comics, and you look and see what their artists and their writers are, and those same guys would jump around to all the different sort of publications because they would shoot up and crash back down. And actually this is such a cool niche concept, because the underground comic scene, they actually kept comics alive. Like comics almost died sometime around like the 70s or 80s, and they kind of got reinvigorated by Comic-Cons. Like the San Diego Comic-Con started, and it just like it created this whole new wave of people and reasons to go and support this thing. But before that comic convention, it had almost died a few times, and what it kept it sustaining was freaking head shops that were selling, like bongs, but right next to the bong they had all these Shock Comics and Zap and Art Crumb. And it's so cool because like those adult underground comics kind of like kept just the comic medium alive to this day. And without them, like it might have kind of been on life support and then never kind of had that reinvigoration with the San Diego Comic-Cons. Like, who the hell knows though,
And you said there's mycomics.com?
I think it's called mycomicshop.com. There's a lot of different ones, but that one is like my go-to when I'm trying to find something. And if it's not there, it's on eBay.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got like a couple right here that I got recently. Let's see. This is what is this? I don't know. It's going to be blurry for you, but this one is called Weirdum Comics, Comix, and back in the the 70s, 80s, that was a big thing. Is if it was COMIX, then that was like the adult underground version of it. And then we've got weird. I don't want to show this one on the. I don't know if this is gonna get. I don't want to get you ratioed or anything, but I've got one here called Weird Trips, and at the bottom it says drugs, sex, the occult, and UFOs, and it's got a big blue giant that his third leg looks like a martini, like extends all the way out, and it turns into a martini glass. So he's like drinking this martini glass that is made from his own self. And I've got I mean I can't recommend those enough because those are the ones that are absolutely not going to have Netflix specials. They're not going to have they're not going to be in a Happy Meal toy. But these are the things that made sure that X-Men can even exist today. And without this dude drinking the martini from himself, you might not have the Incredible Hulk movie coming out.
And you mentioned you had one DC series, the rest was Marvel. Is that typically the case? You're either in the DC camp or the Marvel camp. Is there some crossover, or is it like, Crips and Bloods?
I think it's Crips and Blood. Like now there's more of like a global conglomerate. Like everyone loves each other. Let's have these great crossovers. Marvel, Capcom, DC obviously is like a great addition to that. But like the way that the company is just like, oh well, we want to do what Marvel's doing and DC's doing. Oh, they've got a theme park, we're gonna have a theme park. Oh, they've got Happy Meals, we're gonna have, we'll do Burger King if they've got McDonald's. Like there's always this thing where they're just doing the same thing to compete with each other, I guess. So I think there was always like a Bloods versus Crips version of that. And for at least for me, the reason was that DC was always like, you can't be like the DC guys. Like they were born, or they came from outer space, or they came from the depths of the earth. Like you can't be Aquaman or Superman unless you were freaking born on Krypton, right? Like you have no chance on being him. Everyone in the Marvel universe, like you could potentially become Wolverine if you also got kidnapped and had your skeleton replaced with adamantium and, were trained and everything. And you might potentially be able to become, Cyclops or all these other guys if you just walked into the secret ooze, right? And you got bit by the radioactive spider. So that was always this cool aspect of like, I might potentially in some alternate universe, I could be Spider-Man, but there's just like no way I could ever be Superman. So it felt like I couldn't bond with that or like connect with it as much. But also at a certain point, it was like, dude, how much of a cheat code is that? It's just like the dude just comes from outer space and like you just can't shoot him with bullets and he can fly and he's got laser. Like he just does everything. You know what I mean? Like where's the part where, oh, he's actually this high school kid that gets bullied and he has to make sure that his parents don't find out. Like there's some aspects of that, but they kind of got retrofitted into a lot of the DC characters after Marvel started, on their route. And it was like, oh crap, we need to make our heroes more relatable. And then DC kind of like started shifting a little bit, and they went both ways, right? They're all kind of going to this big homogenous center where they all are just turned into Happy Meal toys. That's sort of like the end goal for them.
Do you have a take on the movies from either? Are you just a comic purist, or can you enjoy the big screen?
I can enjoy, although I'm also a purist. Like for example, the first X-Men movie was obviously like a great entry and like a start into it, but I'll never forgive some of the like the horrible decisions they made. And I think in the future ones, they've got like Rogue being in school with Iceman and Archangel at the same time, which is kind of crazy because Archangel and Iceman were like the OG X-Men from like the 60s or the 50s, and then Rogue came like in the 80s or the 90s. She was like the new class with Gambit and Jubilee. But to like in the movies to just say, screw it, they're all in the same they're all in the same class now. I don't know, I kind of don't like that part. And then sometime in like the 90s, I think, and more recently, if anyone pays attention to DC, they had like a New 52 was like this whole thing where they exploded into different dimensions, where now you can like explain away any sort of inconsistencies that writers came up with over the last 5 decades, where you could be like, oh, well, the reason why, he died in this issue, but then came alive later in this issue was that there's technically 52 different dimensions within the DC and the Marvel universe. So, that one was Dimension 7, and the other one that you're talking about was Dimension 9, and they look the same, but they live by different rule. And I don't know, I feel like that's like cheat code territory, right? Like just admit that there's some inconsistency and kind of move on. But anyways, that I feel like that kind of like comes up very often with the bigger ones.
Man, I appreciate the knowledge and the details with the comics because I'm not a reader, I must admit. So I'm the dude watching it on the movies and stuff and not picking up on all that. So to kind of hear your insight and take on that, it's fascinating, and I really appreciate that. Is that shirt? Is that I know that's a Paranoid American shirt, but is that kind of an American Gladiator kind of?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
another thing that I grew up on, right? American Gladiators was like the coolest thing ever when I was a kid, man. They had the action figures, they had a cartoon. Like I was in for all of it, even though you go back and watch the clips and
it doesn't
it's
age
just garbage
well.
television, but man, it was so great at the time, right?
I wanted to do that obstacle course so bad. Or I don't know if you ever did it on the Jungle Gym. There was that one where the two dudes would like get on the monkey bars and they'd have to like scissor each other to knock each other down. We used to do that all the time at recess.
My favorite one was just the guns with the tennis balls. That was my absolute favorite one.
So good. Must watch TV on Saturdays.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a great Bill Hicks routine too. He loved making fun of people that liked American Gladiators.
I'll take it.
Man, Bill Hicks, Nickelodeon, Disney, getting all into the nostalgia feels today. I think we could go on for hours and hours, but we want to be super respectful of your time. We have 4 rapid fire questions for you that we ask all our guests.
Let's go.
Are you a coffee drinker?
No.
No. Do you do any caffeine or anything, or no?
Nope.
Wow.
No, I wake up. I'm the most annoying person to my girlfriend, but I wake up and if it's 5:30 or if it's 6 or if it's 4:45, whatever, the second that I wake up for the day, like my engines are fully like I'm firing on all engines. I don't have like a ramp up time where like, oh, don't talk to me in the morning. I'm groggy. I gotta go and take a shower and get into the day. That happens to me at night. Like I start like falling real quick and getting groggy, but man, like I just wake up immediately and I'm ready to go. Like and that might be like an old military thing of like, wake up, calisthenics, run a mile. Like that's still in me. Like as soon as I wake up, that programming is like, bam, 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 you got to go run right now. Except I don't get up and run. I just get up and I walk over into the other room and I sit down and I start typing or, working on something stupid. But yeah, I don't need caffeine at all unless it's like I'm driving long distances, and I'll fucking slam a few like Red Bulls or Bangs or something, right?
Right on. Thomas, do you have any daily practices or rituals that you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of yourself?
I've got one that I just started doing. Shout out to lucidcenter.org. I had a meeting with them, like a online consultation thing about lucid dreaming, and it's all about doing these reality checks during the day of that's the one thing. Like I really am not a ritualistic person. In fact, I try to like be anti-ritual. I might try to use my left hand to brush my teeth one day and then the right hand the next day, just to like constantly keep the brain, like always keep it guessing kind of thing. But this one ritual, I've been doing my best. So it's constantly doing reality checks where you try to tell yourself to do things that are impossible. So I got this cup, right? So I might say like, the next time I reach for this cup, my hand's just going to go right through it. Like the cup's not even there. It's a hologram. And obviously when I go to do it, the cup's there. So I know that I'm in reality right now. But the point is that you train yourself over time to do that like second nature, so that if you ever are in a dream and you think, I'm going to grab that cup and my hand's going to go through it, and if it actually does it, you can immediately recognize that you're inside of a dream and then take control of it and then turn it into a lucid dream. So that's one version that I would say is like a daily ritual. And the other big thing too is the second that you wake up, if it's in the middle of the night, in the morning, the first thing to think of is like, what did I just dream about? Did I go through any emotions? Did I see any like impressive images? And just like sit there and just think as hard as you can before you get up and get out of the bed and start your day. So, and that's all just trying to get like creative visions and just, all the coolest ideas I think come to people in their sleep or in their dreams. So I'm trying to tap into that in a more like active sense.
You knock it through doors as you go through them?
I mean, that's part of it, right? That's one of the the reality checks. There's a whole bunch of cool ones, man. I love it. It's like such a fun thing to play with yourself, like a mental psych out game constantly.
Have you had any lucid dreams yet?
I've had one where I realized it, right? Like I did, like my hand, like not literally, but whatever my reality check was, I was like, oh, I'm in a dream, so I can take control of it now. Like I'm gonna do something real cool. And then I just like went back into like a deeper sleep. So like I was there and I saw, like I knew what I had to do, and I didn't know I didn't know what to do with myself, and I just like fell deeper into it. And when I woke back up, I was like, damn, like I was right there and I knew that I was there, but for whatever reason, it was like the river just freaking swept me back along.
Right on. Cool.
I'm getting there though, and that was the biggest advancement I've ever had. I figured I was someone that would never be able to do it, and so it's been blowing my mind lately.
Right on. How long you been doing experimenting with it for now?
So I met with I wish I could remember his first name, but I'm not going to look it up right now. But the lucidcenter.org was maybe a month ago, I think.
Okay.
So I've been doing like dream journal stuff. Like I might, if I wake up, I'll try to write down. Like the other big thing too is that if you do remember any little fragments, just write them down and try to get them as much detail as possible. Because one of the things I'm doing is I'm trying to go back to like these recurring places that I've been to and just explore the hell out of it and maybe turn that into a story or something. I don't know.
All right. How about this one? When you were a kid growing up, did you have a reoccurring dream or nightmare?
Oh yeah. Dude, I feel like I've got like these 5 or 6 dreams that I've just always had. And it's not like every night I have the same one, but if I ever like go to like some weird town and get lost, it's always the same fucking town. And I always get lost in like the same places and find my way. Like I've got a reoccurring dream where like I'll get lost because I just wander too much or my car breaks down or like my friends bring me out somewhere and then forget me, like whatever it is. And I'm just always end up like running home and I'm just like hating it because I'm like tired and exhausted and I'll wake up and I'll be like, oh, thank God I don't have to run anymore. You know what I mean? Like, so like, that's just this constant theme that's constantly going on. That's one of the reasons I'm trying to figure out like, what the hell am I running from? Like, why do I keep getting, lost in this freaking town? Why does the town always like look the same and have the same buildings?
Interesting. Cool. Well, good luck with it.
Yeah, I played with some lucid dreaming stuff myself, so I find I'm gonna try some of those skills that you kind of talked about and practices to add to it. I had similar experience once where I realized I was having a lucid dream and I was like, I can do anything I want. I'm gonna drive a DeLorean, and next thing you know, I was driving a DeLorean. So that tells you how much of a '90s kid that I am.
I love that, man. And I feel like I was right there and I was like, I want to drive a DeLorean. And then I just like passed out in the street, wherever I was at. Right.
Also, I don't know if you've ever played with it. There's some valerian root will kind of help aid that process. It's like a natural herb, and I know alpha brit or some on it supplements I used to take help with that. I don't even know if they make some of that stuff
I've
anymore.
I've tried valerian root. I've tried I can't remember all the different names. I've tried a few different like nootropic style stuff. I don't do like the weird ones that like get invented in Russia and they've only been around for 2 years. You know what I mean? I don't go that crazy.
Those are the best ones.
Yeah, I'm sure they are, bro. They're essentially like
they're
legal drugs until someone dies. Then they gotta like write a law against it, right? But I mean, a lot of them all go to like sort of like holistic ones that have been around for a long time. Blue Lotus, valerian root's another one. And actually a big suggestion that came is you just use marijuana, because like you do it for a certain amount of time and then you just cut yourself off cold turkey, and that always triggers insane memories. And if you know that, you don't have to look at that as like a negative side effect for having to quit or like trying to take a tolerance break or something. You could just say like, I want to work on my lucid dream sort of skills, and I know how I can trigger a very detailed dream state by just smoking for a week and then stopping for a week. And you just know that those dreams are coming. And it's almost like if you're a surfer and there's a fucking storm coming, like those waves are going to be out there. You might not be able to surf all of them, but that the waves are going to be out there. And to be able to control when those waves come. That's like such a powerful technique. But I mean, it takes a lot of freaking self-discipline to be like, I'm gonna get stoned, all the time this week, and then I'm just not gonna do it at all next week, or I'm gonna do it for a month and I'm gonna stop for a week and not do it at all. Like, you actually have to turn it into like a freaking disciplined martial arts style regimen that takes the fun out of it, right? Like, you're not getting stoned as much to like be high and everything. It's like, oh, I'm doing this for an actual purpose at the end of it. But it's would probably be hard to find any other drug out there that would sort of let you get there, outside of maybe salvia divinorum or salverin A, which that's one that just blows my mind, bro. Like, that's a topic that I can go in on for, a 9-hour podcast or whatever. But that one, I'm fully convinced there hasn't been enough research, but it taps directly into whatever the hell controls your dreams. Like, that thing just brings you right into it, but you don't have control. Like, they just strap you. It's like a dark ride at Spaceship Earth, right? They just strap you in, and it's just like, you're gonna go around this ride, and at the end of it, you're gonna be like, whoa, did that fucking happen?
That was 15 years and 15 seconds. How the hell did that happen? Yeah. So, Thomas, I could go on and on with those lucid dreams. Really appreciate that. And you were right. Those when you come down off of marijuana, those dreams are just as much as the high as when you're on marijuana. I agree with you. What are you listening to right now? Music, audiobooks, podcasts? Are you reading anything?
I've listened to very little that has words, because like I do programming or I'm writing during the day, so I can't hear lyrics while I'm trying to like type programs or type scripts. So it's almost all like whatever the latest net, like Spider something or other. There was like a show that came out on Netflix about CIA agent or something, Spider something. I haven't even seen it, but I love listening to like the scores of like new movies that come out and stuff. The one that I've been listening to religiously that does have lyrics is the new Viagra Boys release. I'm a huge Viagra Boys fan, so that's been my go-to when I want to listen to lyrics.
All right, I'll have to check that out. I'm unfamiliar with the Viagra Boys.
Check out Viagra Boys, man. Huge shout out to Viagra Boys.
Shout out to Viagra Boys. Thomas, last but certainly not least, what is your favorite conspiracy theory?
It's probably MK Ultra, just because it's got everything. It spans the entire world. It's got drugs, it's got mind control, it's got kidnapping, it's got torture, it's got espionage, it has every single thing you could ever want, and it's got the documentation to back it up. So to me, it's kind of like the best entry point to get someone that might be the biggest skeptic, and be like, hey, do you think that the government ever funded children and women and old people to just be dosed with LSD for just a month straight and just play looping freaking commands in their head over and over and over just to see what would happen? No? Well, here, check out this, documentation from you and Cameron and all of the activities that they went with, like psychic looping and psychic driving. Or do you believe that the government has tried to do remote control with animals? We'll take out Jose Delgado's remote stimulus bull and the electronic carrot and everything else. So again, like MK Ultra just is like a freaking sampler pack. It's the Whitman sampler of government conspiracies. You know what I mean? It's got like something for everybody in there.
Thank you so much for this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I know I said before we could go for hours, but
yeah, man.
really, really awesome talking to a like-minded mind who's out there producing some really epic stuff. Keep on doing it and keep on spreading the message you're spreading on all the podcasts you're going on.
Thank you so much, guys. I mean, it's a small little world, honestly, and after a while, you kind of notice that the sort of personalities that you really sort of get attracted to and vibe with, like it's the same little community. So you'll go and talk to someone else and be like, "Oh yeah, we're talking about that same MK Ultra. Have you heard about this comic?" And that's just kind of how like the movements sort of start and keep going, And again, I've been doing this since not just 2012. I probably started in like 2006, then decided to make a company around 2012, but I'll be doing this for another decade or two until I'm freaking dead, basically. So I'm not going anywhere. So if anyone wants to make a comic book about a conspiracy theory or wants me to make one about it, just find me. I'll be here.
Have you ever thought about doing something on like the mud flood or Tartaria?
In issue 2 of the Chosen One, we're gonna actually what like it's got like a nice 12-page spread that we go in. Like again, I don't take anything seriously, so there's a lot of poking fun and a lot of just like taking things that seem like sacrilege and just like making it funny and just dick jokes and fart jokes and so. But yeah, there's gonna be lots of references to Tartaria in issue 2 of the Chosen One, and issue
Sweet.
3 entirely takes place in a place called Tartantia, which is it tain't quite the surface of the earth, but it also tain't quite the middle of the earth.
Dude,
So it's Tartantia.
that's
When
awesome.
are those going to be out and available?
Well, the Chosen One is wrapped like tomorrow morning. The Kickstarter will be over for the first issue, and it's going to be at least a 6 series thing. And I think that it's maybe taken 2 months per issue or something. So
Okay.
like July, September, August might be issue 2. So then issue 3 will probably be around just before December. And I'm really excited about that one because issue 3 has Gordo. For issue 2 has Sam Tripoli, XG, and Johnny in it. It's got Alex Stein, Primetime Stein 99's in it. He has a cameo. In issue 3, Gordo is in, and then in issue 4 we've got Isaac Weishaupt is going to be in that issue. So it's going to go through like all of your favorite personalities, and they're all going to be doing some dumb and funny shit.
All right, that's excellent. We're looking forward to that. We'll put all that stuff in the show notes as well for you.
Right on, guys.
Awesome.
Have a great night. It was great talking with you, Thomas. Thank you for your time.
Likewise, man. Please, anytime, I'm down to talk about any topic for as long as you want, man.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get you back on at some point to talk about salvia.
Yeah, let's fucking do it, dude. Honestly, I doubt you'll find. I mean, I'm not like well versed anymore, but in the 90s, I was in the top 1% of people that were experienced with the deep realms of salvia. So yeah, dude.
Excellent. I want to hear all about it.
All
Take care. Have a great night.
right, see you guys.
Later.
Later.